nature. Really the hottest nigga, you gon' respect this lava. I'm shooting it if I pull it, boy, make sure you want this drama. I bring it to you like it's Law and Order SVU. Turn you to a vegetable, now you look good inside a soup. Family come from Bishopville, but I grew up in that Bronx Zoo where they shoot you dead in the street and then dance all on top of you. And I do what I gotta do.
Started. Please don't get me started. Started.
The most serious video that I've ever made. And I want y'all to bear with me. Those of you who decided to click on this video, thank you very much. I want you to watch this video to the very end because I'm going to be making a lot of strong points, alright? And the topic of this video is that being a closeted LGTB man, amongst other things, contributes to the psychotic nature in men. Dealing with that and repressed desires. Also, when you mix in narcissism and social awkwardness, that makes for a bad situation in men, okay? So, without further ado, let's get to it. The reason why I have Jeffrey Dahmer in the background is because I, just like millions of other people, have watched the Dahmer show, series, whatever you want to call it, and that led me on a rabbit hole to watch the John Wayne Gacy tapes on Netflix, and also the Ted Bundy tapes. I grew up, hearing about Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer and all these other serial killers, and I feel that I have a theory. Now, if I'm crazy, I'm crazy. If I don't know what I'm talking about, you can let me know that I don't know what I'm talking about. But my theory is that being a closeted LGTB man and also growing up in an environment where there isn't enough love or there isn't enough communication, and also when you have a child who is being raised without knowing the right social cues, not being able to not be socially awkward, you have the right mixing pot to create a psychopath. And I'm going to go through my list of different points, and I'm going to explain what I learned from watching a whole bunch of videos in the rabbit hole of Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy. And I'm also, is it John Wayne Gacy? It's John Gacy. I don't know if my name is Wayne. And I'm also going to correlate this to the down low behavior that goes on in neighborhoods that we come from. Because I also feel that a lot of the most violent people in our neighborhoods are actually on the down low. And they have repressed desires. And they're dealing with those desires by doing things like joining these frivolous gangs and being extra violent towards men, because in a way, they hate themselves for feeling the way they feel, right? So to start it off with, being closeted LGTB contributes to the psychotic nature in men. Hyperviolent men in gangs. Let's talk about it. Hyperviolent men in gangs. If you want to be totally honest about it, men who grow up in broken homes, especially in our black communities, but this happens in all kinds of communities, where for whatever reason, the father's not there or the father is there, and he's not the right masculine figure in a child's life. And we're going to focus this on the young men, the sons, the boys. And these type of families where usually he's not there, or he's there, but he's not involved in his child's life the way he should be. Maybe he, especially, back in the day at the time where Dahmer was coming up, where, his father was an army vet, a veteran who, he came home and he wasn't too attentive to his wife. Him and his wife were beefing a lot. He spent most of his time at work, hiding from his family. He enjoyed being outside of his house, away from his family, more than being inside of his house, which left Jeffrey Dahmer with a mother who was a drug addict who tried to take her own life more than once and wasn't attentive to her children. If you remember from watching the Jeffrey Dahmer episodes, you would see a young Dahmer come home and his young brother is bawling, screaming, crying in the crib, not being attended to, and then he go in his parents' room and his mother is laid out, passed out from attempting to take her own life, right? These types of environments breed sociopaths. and psychopaths. This is why I gotta stress the utter importance of children having 2 attentive parents in their life, which is always better than 1, even if the parents cannot love each other enough to stay together. This is why if you have children, you need to do everything you can to be in your children's lives, at least to see them as often as possible, especially if you have a boy, especially if you know the mother of your child is a certain type of woman that is undesirable. Moving on to my next point, right? Matter of fact, I'm gonna stay on that point. Those of us who come from the same neighborhood like mine, like for example, my father passed away when I was 3 years old. After that, shortly after, my mother got with my stepfather, and at the time when I was growing up early on, they were addicted to alcohol and they would fight all the time, and I fought with my stepfather all the time, and it caused me to go out into the streets, and because of what I was going through in the home, it caused me to go outside and act hyper masculine, be hyper violent. I'm sure there's some men watching this video who can relate to me saying that sometimes I used to get mad in the house and go outside, and the thing that I'm thinking of is, I want to rob somebody now. I want to beat somebody up. I want to hurt somebody because I really want to hurt the 2 people in the home. But I'm too afraid to do that. I have to take this aggressiveness out on someone else. I have to take this out on someone else. Now, also another point is broken homes and homes where children are not being attended to enough. This is a breeding environment for children to be taken advantage of. And when I say children taken advantage of, I'm going to use a euphemism, and I'm going to talk in code and speak in letters, because I don't want YouTube to affect this video in any way negatively, right? So children come from broken homes who are victims of CSA. The first word in CSA is child, and you can figure out the rest, right? Now, what do we know about children who go through this? This leads to, and also this is what, unfortunately, the LGBT community does not speak enough on, but this is probably mostly what leads to children growing up and living the alternative lifestyle. Let's just call it what it is, okay? This is what happens. This is definitely what happens. And you combine that to children being predisposed to something that they were too young for their spirit and their mind and their heart to comprehend, which from that point on for the rest of their lives, they move with a altered, perverted mind. And in the most extreme cases, right, you get, first of all, in the most extreme cases, you could end up with someone like the many murderers who they get locked up and then they tell their life story, and you find out that they were victims of CSA at a young age. On a low level, you'll get the kind of people in jail who do what they do, which I'm going to get to in a later point. But in the most extreme levels, you can end up getting a Jeffrey Dahmer. You could end up getting a John Wayne Gacy, or insert whatever other person's name here. Now, let me move on to my next point. Hyper-violent men in gangs. Do you realize that usually when a man decides to join a gang, there's a level of masculinity that he's needing in his life? I used to partake in such things, and I'll be the first one to say there was a feeling of masculinity that I was lacking in my life. But I was not a victim of CSA, so my case is slightly different. You take men who are victims of CSA, and they come from a broken home. If they don't have a psychotic break, you still end up with these young men who were abused at a young age, and they still have feelings. They may find that they have attractions to men. They think things that they wish they didn't think in their mind. They have kinds of dreams that they wish they did not have. Okay? And a lot of these men end up in gangs. Some of these men are the highest ranking gang members out in the street, the highest ranking gang members in prison. And these are some of the most violent, cruel men imaginable. Some of these men are the men who are on the streets right now that are so quick to harm another man because they hate who they are. You get it? Like, they hate who they are. They have to get this aggression out. They have to get the aggression out. Like, there's a such thing as, like when you're a child and you're a boy and a girl likes you and that girl may hit you. She may be physically aggressive with you. That's no different than you being a boy and you may be a little bit older and you have a boy being physically aggressive with you. What's not to say that the boy being physically aggressive with you, trying to be your bully in high school or something, or junior high, had not been a victim of CSA. And he's finding an excuse to just touch another boy. Like who's to say? Who's to say that guy doing the nutcracker? By nutcracker, when a guy, they playing and they punch on the genitalia. What's to say there's not some kind of erotic expression that young boy is not feeding off of? What's to say that? There is nothing to say that. There's nothing to say that. And also, there's no way of 100% proving what I'm saying is right, because you would have to have all men sit down and be perfectly honest with the feelings that they have inside. I personally believe that there are men who live totally regular lives who may never even act on it, but they want to get with men. They have these repressed desires, and in some situations, nothing ever happened to them. But in most situations, I feel like something happened to them. They were in a certain kind of environment growing up. It is what it is. It is what it is. And when I speak on the hyper-aggressiveness, now I want to talk about serial killer John Gacy, or Wayne Gacy, whatever his name is, right? This man right here worked for the Democratic Party. This man had women. This man had children. But this man ran a company, a building company, where he only hired young, impressionable boys. This is the same person who elected to do a favor for a young boy who was 18 at the time. And the young boy stayed over at his house. And he, the letter S, assaulted that boy in the nighttime. This is somebody who would say, hey, I am not of the alternative lifestyle. But yet he does what he does. Now, in an environment, and mind you, these are people who were born in like the 40s and 50s and the 30s and stuff like that. But had that same man grew up and would have been 30 right now in 2022, this is a man who probably would have just came out and lived his life. Instead of being somebody who his desires were repressed so much that he resorted to being on the low, taking advantage of younger men, physically doing things to them, right? And not having the comfort and the confidence to come out because of whatever society's norms were at the time. He didn't have the confidence to come out, so he did things to these boys purposely, and then realized, hey, I have to take your life and I have to bury you in my house because I cannot risk you getting away and telling anyone what I did to you and damning my reputation. Nobody can know that I am a man of the alternative lifestyle. I have too much weighing on this. I have a woman and a family, but that's just the front. Yeah, sure, I'll hit a chick, but in all due reality, I am Gizne, right? Right? Every man, scratch that, every human, but focusing on men, develops the deep urge to express themselves in a sexual way. Like, for instance, I gave my young son, Cameron, 10 years old, I gave him the talk. We all know what the talk is, the talk about the birds and the bees. And I remember him saying, Dad, please tell me what it is. Asking me, how does it feel? How is he supposed to feel? All I could do was tell him the truth. I told him to wait as long as you can. Your life is never going to be the same after the first time you get some. Deep down in an animalistic way, everything you do is going to be in motivation to gain the physical pleasure of a woman. I told him about, consent dealing with women. I told him about, protecting himself and wearing condoms, this, that, and the third. But I realized that, just like many other young kids, his human nature was beginning to kick in. his human nature was beginning to kick in. And as a parent, that's something you have to deal with. It's important for us as parents to have our kids interact with other kids, even if they're going to get into squabbles, even if they may face some rejection when a kid says that they don't want to be their friend. We have to encourage our children to be sociable so they got the right social skills, because Dahmer was a sick man. Wayne Gacy was a sick man. These were sick men. But someone like Dahmer, he wasn't raised to have the right social cues. That's why you see him in school acting goofy, making noises. He gets to jail and he's playing with his food like he's eating human flesh and all this other weird crap. This is what happens when you raise your children not having the proper social skills and the proper social tools, right? This is what happens. You could be creating the next Jeffrey Dahmer, the next Wayne Gacy. Another thing about repressed desires. There's also a serial killer named Ed Gein, right? From back in the day. This is a man who was raised by a super religious mother and an alcoholic father. And him and his brother were not allowed to interact with anyone. Anytime they may have began to interact with some children and have friends, their mother would shut that down. Their mother would just shut that down, and they used to say, hey, they're gonna go to hell, and women, you can't trust them. They're fast, they're floozies, and they stayed under their mother for years. Ed Gein began to view his mother as this saintly God figure, and he took care of her to her last breath. After she passed, he developed this thing about dead bodies and making love to dead bodies and the need to have body parts close to him and make things out of skin and make bowls out of skulls. And these were all women. And he also made a suit made of skin in an effort to be reunited with his mother that he wore. And when you look at this is clearly a man who most likely was a virgin. And for all we know, maybe his mother did some things to him in a CSA kind of way, but because he never said that, we can't say that. But his mother assumingly would be the only naked woman he probably seen ever in person. This is somebody who clearly, after his mother passed and he did everything he did to these women to the point where he ended up making a mask, and the mask and the skin suit and walking around the back of his house, feeling good about himself, feeling like he was one with his mother again. This is clearly a mix of a man being broken from losing the only woman he's ever known. Forget love, no. And also deep repressed sexual desires, to where in a point he wanted to be inside of his mother. He wanted to be inside of his mother, right? That's just something to think about. Moving on to my next point, let's talk about the incels. You look at the picture and you get the story of every guy who ever went to a school and did a Sandy Hook, went to a school and did a Columbine. You look at their stories, you look at who they are, you can tell these were people who lacked certain social skills. These were not popular kids, not kids with a strong peer group, not kids who easily got along with other kids, not kids who developed the right social skills, gamers who played extremely violent games. Some of these young men were men who may have had a girlfriend and they suffered their first breakup. And they don't know how to emotionally handle that because they weren't raised by people who were paying enough attention to them. Or, for instance, I seen a story about a guy who went and did a Columbine at a school. This was a guy who was a virgin and literally was mad at women for not wanting to be his girlfriend and lay down with him. For some reason, men who have repressed sexual desires that don't express them in a healthy way they develop either this perverted way of expressing it in ways like Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Gein, or instead of developing it in a weird way like that, they do wild, egotistical, narcissistic things like being mad at whatever cause is going on in the world, or being mad at some girl who hurt their feelings, and they take it out on everyone around them. And next thing you know, they're going into a mall in Buffalo, New York, and doing a Columbine. I guess men can just be wicked in that way, you know? I really just guess men can be wicked in that way, and it's very important for men to be able to express themselves physically in a healthy way, whether they are straight or not. It's important for everyone to encourage the people who you may suspect to be someone who should be living the alternative lifestyle. It's important to encourage them to be that, you know. This actually reminds me of what I seen in J.K. Rowling's last couple movies, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, where they grew up in a time where wizarding was something that was being suppressed. And for the children whose magic was being suppressed, it would manifest itself in this violent, destructive, natural force that destroyed everything around them. And that to me reminds me of what happens with these men who they grow up in these homes where they're not shown enough love. They're not spoken to about things like consent and how to express yourself with a woman or a man. If they're gonna go that way, they're suppressed and suppressed and suppressed by having super religious women in their lives. I mean, mothers, super religious parents. They're not paid attention to by their parents. Because, you know, a girlfriend or a hug and a good conversation from a parent or uncle could have saved a lot of lives. It could have stopped a lot of Sandy Hooks from happening, a lot of Columbines from happening. Which furthers my point of depressed, suppressed desires in men lead to the psychotic tendencies that you will find in a Jeffrey Dahmer, a Ted Bundy, who, by the way, Ted Bundy grew up acting like he really was lit, but people tell you that, you know, he wasn't that lit. He was real socially awkward, and he had a dark side, and he didn't have a girlfriend till a real late age, and, you know, that breakup is what pushed him to attack so many women and do all this crazy foul stuff. And then when you mix a man's nature to want to be in control, because you see, women's nature, they want to be in control, but in a passive way. Men want to be in control to a way where they will physically take control of a situation if they deem it necessary. So, not being raised with the right social cues, coming from rough childhoods, having a suppressed sexual desire, and being exposed to perversion at a young age contributes to the psychotic nature in men and the hyper-aggressiveness in men. Forced to love something that they don't want to love contributes to the psychotic nature in men. It does. And now I want to go into a man called Sigmund Freud, who is a world-renowned, I want to say, psychologist. And this is somebody who, one second, I'm going to find it right now. Sigmund Freud was an Austrian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis. So this is somebody who studied the human brain and human nature. A clinical method for evaluating and treating pathologies in the psyche through dialogue between a patient and a psychoanalyst. Freud was born, whatever, doesn't matter, right? It says, what is Sigmund Freud most famous for? Freud is famous for inventing and developing the technique of psychoanalysis, for articulating the psychoanalytic theory of motivation, mental illness, and the structure of the subconscious, and for influencing scientific and popular conceptions of human nature by posting that both normal and aboriginal thought and okay, there's nothing else there. But I'm gonna find what I was getting to, right? Let me tell you the importance of what this man said. What is Freud? Why is Freud so important in psychology? Consider the father of modern psychology. His theories and ideas on the connections that exist between the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, the body, and the world around us are still as widely known as they were when he first exposed them at the turn of the 20th century. What is Sigmund Freud's first theory? Freud developed a theory that humans have an unconscious in which sexual and aggressive impulses are in perpetual conflict for supremacy with the defenses against them. To call it short, he's saying that basically human beings are animals and we have urges, both when it comes to sexuality and in just aggression and violence, that it's in us on a primal level and it's in us subconsciously, in our conscience, and societal norms are what it fights against. And for the most part, it's for the betterment of society because we've become less savage and more civilized, right? Even though there's a lot of violence going on today, you know, 100 years ago, definitely 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, there was way more violence. There was way more depravity going on, you know, as far as people living in bestiality and different things like that, right? And he basically defends what I grew to think and what I've grown to know, which is that as human beings, especially as men have urges, and it's society that keeps men from acting out these urges. And I'm not gonna say most, but a lot of the urges that men have can be very negative. Like, for instance, I said in a video before that as a man, as a young man, up to now, I could be walking anywhere and I could see random people, I'm gonna say men who have not done anything to me, not a real threat, but in my mind, I could picture myself doing something very bad to them if I want to. And a lot of men agree with that. And I feel like that's a human nature thing. It's a human nature thing. It comes from thousands of years of our DNA of constant fighting and battling and warring with other people. Being that we're civilized, we don't randomly act on it. But it's still something that comes to the subconscious mind. You know, you have men who were raised in different environments where they were victims of things like CSA or parents who were on drugs, but unfortunately, they didn't find a way to prosper beyond that. And they learned things that they weren't supposed to learn at a very young age. And it helped push their mind further in a direction that it should have never went. And you end up with a Jeffrey Dahmer, or Wayne Gacy, or John Gacy, whatever his name is, or Ted Bundy, or an Ed Gein, or at the lowest, most extreme level, a gangbanger who is very aggressive, hates himself, hates other men, hates the man that he is, and then he goes to jail, he goes to prison. He becomes a high-ranking gang member, and what does he do? He takes the manhood. He forcibly penetrates other men or coerces other men to agree to let him penetrate them or receive sexual favor in order for protection. But that's just a theory of mine. Y'all let me know what y'all think, man. It's Nate Almighty, aka the Global Dark Skin Ambassador. Peace.